Good morning. We are dealing with the different developmental tasks, which in the different developmental stages of human being. And we'll be dealing shortly with puberty, adolescence, middle age, and old age today. We know that the reproductive hormonal activity is triggered by the central nervous system, and at the age of puberty, we see that the hypothalamus and pituitary glands start acting, and therefore there's a production of large number of hormones. We know that the puberty is set somewhere around, it is dependent on the age, depending on the health and weight and the stress factors of an individual. And we see that generally it is about 10 to 14 years. It is the onslaught is seen in the girls, whereas in boys it's between the 11 and 15 years. We see it's a time of a rapid growth and change, and we can see that there is lots of physical development, cognitive development, and emotional and social skills are developed. And we see that there is also a large number of sensory and motor development. Puberty is a short and overlapping period. It is divided into stages like prepubescent, pubescent, and postpubescent. We see here the appearance of the secondary sexual characteristics like the appearance of pubic hair, the growth of breasts, and the first emission of semen in men, that is the boys. And also we see that the puberty is a time of rapid growth and change where there's an increase in the body proportions. And also this is known as the negative phase because here there is the behavior characteristic is in the negative phase of puberty is more pronounced in girls than in the boys. Now, generally, the time of amount or the amount of time needed to complete the transformation process in puberty is about 2 to 4 years in the girls, requiring slightly less time than boys. Now, here we see that the boys and the girls are confused according to their feelings. They may feel inadequate or insecure, and in many cases, we find unfavorable behavioral changes in them. Parents notice that they are either negative attitudes or they are complaining or they are show resistance, and there is a delay and arguments, and also we see the testing the patience of their parents. Now when puberty does begin, the adolescent transformation becomes emotionally intensified and more complex. The adolescent stage follows the puberty stage. The early onslaught is known as the puberty. We see number of physical and psychological changes here. Besides, they'll be learning to understand what is normalcy and sex appropriateness. And we see a number of psychological hazards being seen. Sometimes we see that they have difficulty in trying to what we call follow the normally sexual roles prescribed by society as such. And also we sometimes see deviant sexual maturing. Sometimes people mature early, whereas sometimes there are late maturers. But then, if the people mature early, we see that they have more scope for leadership compared to the persons who mature slower. Sometimes, because it is also seen that in early maturers, there is more hostility, more depression, anxiety, and more substance abuse. So, for girls, the early maturation brings awkwardness and even psychological changes. And early maturing girls may be taller and heavier, and therefore they may face somewhat a social exclusion. Now, when we see the social and emotional changes, we see that they have a sort of uncertain or unfamiliar social experiences, and they are also defined by their peers, their culture, and their family background. And they become interested in forming the intense romantic relationships at this stage, and sometimes sexualized relationships with others. And therefore, we find that they may have some popularity, while some more slowly maturing may experience a decline in popularity. So then we also see that these people experience new emotional experiences. We find that there are raging hormones and there are fluctuating hormone levels create sort of mood changes. And also we see that their feelings of self-esteem or self-concept also change. So we see that this is a bad time actually when they are separating from the shelter of childhood and begin striving for social belonging or place among others. The growth spurt is also seen at this stage when we find because of the activities of the hormones, there is a sudden increase in the body size and weight. Now, also there are various factors which may be hereditary or environmental, which may actually affect the growth. And we see that there is an increase in the body proportions, the feet size, and also we see that the sudden growth will continue up till the age of 20 or 21. And we see all these increases in height, weight, and strength go on. But also these are dependent on the nutritional levels that are provided by the family economic status. And sometimes poor nutrition in childhood also gives rise to poor stature, whereas good nutrition tries to give good stature. And the emotional disturbances can also cause growth effects. Now we see that because of the poor nutrition, there may be illnesses. Also, there may be some emotional tensions, or there may be delayed fusion of the bones. And sometimes the children may not attain the full height. And these body changes and the primary, secondary, and sexual characteristics changes, all these start around the age of 13. They may be completed by the age of 15, and in some cases by the age of 18. So we also find in the puberty that there is some fat in the subcutaneous tissue that is below the skin. We find the accumulation of fat and also increase in bone and muscle tissues. Girls experience greater weight gain just before and after the menarche. Also, we find that there is a rapid growth in body size just before 1 or 2 years before the sex organs begin to function. And we see that there are changes in the cartilage, and the cartilage calcifies at this stage. And boys develop broader shoulders, straighter hips, and longer forearms and legs. Also, we see that the primary sexual characteristics like enlarged breasts and hips for girls, facial hair and deeper voices for boys, and hair and sweat glands also change in both the sexes. The most significant noticeable puberty-related change for young men is sperm arc, or the first ejaculation. It starts around the age of 12 to 16, and we see that this generally occurs during sleep. The primary sex characteristics for girls also include the uterus starting to build a lining that will later be shed through the process of menstruation. We find the vaginal lubrication, and these changes happen just before a girl experiences her first menarche. Also, we see that in adult women, there's the process of menstruation starting, and the first periods can be embarrassing or somewhat uncomfortable for young ladies. We also see that all these secondary sexual characteristics may also have some sort of emotional effects on the girls, and the girls may feel uncomfortable during puberty due to the trying to accommodate their body growth and also the development of all these changes. We see that the widening of pelvic bones and the increase in body fat in percentage and the development of breasts make the girls self-conscious. Sometimes we see that there are certain changes, and we see that all the normal and expected changes may be considered somewhat out of way by the girls. We also see the changes in the boys' voices. We see that they deepen, their larynx or voice box grows larger, and the vocal cord muscles grow stronger, resulting in a deepening of the voice of the boys. Now, this is normal, but the boys may feel embarrassed. So, puberty is both a time of change, which may be exhilarating, at the same time, a daunting time for the youth because they may be unable to come to a what we call adjustment with all these changes, and they may dramatically transform the lives of the children, and they may expose them both to new opportunities and new dangers. So here, thoughtful listening to them as well as careful guidance by the parents may help the children to navigate this stage with great care. Now, adolescence is the next stage, and we can call this as a psychosocial rebirth, has been conceptualized by G. Stanley Hall. Now, this is because they're trying to adjust to the world, and we see a number of characters or changes during this period. This is an important period of change, and this generally ranges somewhere between the early 14, 15 years onwards to 20, sometimes around 13 to 18 years, or sometimes beyond that. They may also, all the teen years may be considered as the adolescent stages, and it may range sometimes even to 21 years. Here we see that is a significant change in multiple life domains, and they have come to accept the changes which have come in the puberty. So this is a post-pubescent stage, we can say, and there are number of ways in which they develop, the thinking patterns develop, and we see they are able to abstract, test, hypothesize, and also understand conceptual concepts, etc. Now, we also see that they have egocentric behaviors and attitudes are still seen here, but they, instead of having their own things satisfied, ego satisfaction, they also now try to accommodate the views of the others. Now, we see that the secondary school settings also have a role in the development of an adolescent. We see that the role prescription or the role, what is the role actually says that they try to understand. And the important task of adolescents is to search for identity. They start to struggle for independence. And there is a change in the biological functioning, in the cognition aspect, as well as the social environment, and their way of learning to interact with interpersonal relationships with others. Also, this is considered as a problem age because they have to adjust themselves to large social changes, and sometimes with much time they spend with the people of the same age or their peers and less time with their parents, and they have a difficulty in understanding the social mores and concepts. And this period of change, they do have various pressures on them. Also, this is a time of unrealism because they involve in certain risky behaviors, and they may be vulnerable to certain outside forces. The current conventional wisdom of adults use, they consider as somewhat irrelevant, and they take risks because they feel they are independent, but at the same time, they may also be helpless or hopeless, and this perception can prompt adolescents to make some poor decisions, which can again leave them vulnerable to physical or psychological problems, harms. And the feelings of uniqueness or trying to be different is also seen at this stage, and we understand that the adolescent is likely to think everyone else is just as concerned with him or her, and they may feel that they may be the center of attraction, and they experience possibly the feelings or somewhat experiences which no other particular person may face. So they're concerned with themselves more. Also, there's a period of transition where they are going from puberty to adulthood. And because of this transition, they find a sort of instability. And depending on the education or training, they are better suited to the adulthood. Now, we have seen that more youth are entering college and delaying the marriage, and this transition becomes even more complex because the economic, the social factors, the cultural settings, all these help in the secondary education and the higher education. And sometimes, if they are not there, or if they continue to educate, we see that there are fractured connections, and there's somewhat a sort of confusion in this period. Now, this is actually adolescent is a transition period between that of the childhood as well as the adulthood. So we find them trying to adjust to all the social, cultural, religious sort of adjustments. And we also see that there is a somewhat increased puberty, and we find at the other end spectrum all the social changes and a growing awareness. All these are trying to help them to transit as well as adjust to the adulthood issues. Now, what are the physical and psychological developments that are seen? We've been talking about all the different secondary sexual characteristics as well as primary sexual characteristics. And besides these, we find that there are sebaceous glands or oil glands that are producing more secretions, which may cause either blackheads or acne, or sometimes sweat is seen. And also there is increase in BP or blood pressure and a decrease in basal metabolic rate. That is, the rate at which a body in a resting stage consumes oxygen. Also see changes in the pulse. Now, according to the psychological development, we see that the adolescent tries to battle against the values set by his parents and society, and he tries to find somewhat satisfaction in his relationships with other peers, other groups, and opposite sex. Now, we see during late adolescence that the adolescents have a more stable sense of their identity and place in society. They try to balance their aspirations or their fantasies with reality. So they may be early trying for self gratification, but at this stage, they may be trying for a balance with the society or trying to develop more conducive interpersonal relations. The moral behavior also may undergo a transition during this period. We know that the Kohlberg has seen this reasoning is found in the at this stage, and also the family relationships also continue. If the person continues to stay with a family, his moral values will be different, whereas those people who are continuing with broken families or single parents, they may have different moral set values. The adolescents typically are expected to obey their fathers if it is a patriarchal family, and subordination is somewhat less expected in societies with female-centered households. That in a female-centered household, subordination is somewhat tolerated. Or it is not sometimes seen at all. During adolescence, we see that the parent and adolescents try to conflict. There may be conflicts about the dress or the social mores or how they have to interact or how they have to reciprocate to social relations, etc. But then we have different type of families in the society, like single parent, shared custody, adoptive parents, blended parents, or foster parents. Sometimes the traditional dual parent. Now, depending on the parents and the bonding and the closeness that the child has with the parent, we see that the emotional development also varies. So, if their parents are better caretaking, and we can see the results in the better school performance as well as engagement in less risk activities. Now, if the parents are warm and involved and they provide guidelines and limits and also help in education and encourage the adolescent to develop his or her own beliefs to the most extent possible, we find if they are able to use reasoning and persuasion, explain the rules, discuss the issues, and listen respectfully, the sort of individuals that the adolescents that are formed may be have reporting less depression and less anxiety, and they may be more achieving, and they have more self-reliance and self-esteem. And also we see less delinquent behavior in these individuals. Now, the process of the formation of the self-interest or self-esteem or self-concept is also seen here. And we see that the person starts feeling, they experiment with different ways of appearing, sounding, and behaving, and how they are appropriately they try to behave in the society, as well as they will try to understand what seriously threatens the youth is their health or their life attitudes. Now, we see that the external attributes, that is, the traits, values, beliefs, and ideologies, also start to develop. We know in the Western societies, which are individualistic societies, the individual initiative is more given importance, whereas in countries like Asian cultures like India, Japan, China, we see that the people are interested in developing more communal sort of life and more cooperative and interdependent than competitive and being individualistic. We have here more familial sort of functions or religious organizations and community activities. And here too, the personal accomplishments and personal characteristics have to take these into consideration. And we see here the achievement behavior, aggression, altruism. This aggression are not seen much more than we see here the altruism and more development is given importance. So according to the societal roles too, the adolescents have different tasks set for them. Now, self-esteem is depending on how they view themselves, and persons sometimes acknowledge their weaknesses and they try to overcome them, and they're positive about the characteristics and the complexities they display. But when people have low self-esteem, they view themselves as failures, and they may have some problems with dealing with other persons, and their relationships may also worsen. So a person having a sense of self-esteem, he will try to develop having self-worth, and he perceives their self-worth somewhat differently in different relational contexts. At the same time, they evaluate themselves, and this self-esteem also helps them to evaluate others. We know that the romantic appeal and quality of close friendships becomes a contributor at adolescents' self-esteem. If a person is having a good romantic appeal, or if he has a close friendships with others, it also contributes to the person's self-esteem, and he will have supportive relationships with friends. And boys are actually have high self-esteem. They are able to deal successfully with their friends, and also the girls are also having self-esteem developed. But low self-esteem in girls is generally seen if they're able to win the societal approval, especially their friends' approval. So low self-esteem in adolescent boys is a lack of romantic competence, as reflected by failure to win a girl's attention. But there are many social influences that contribute to the development of self-esteem. Our home environment, our peers, and our parents' interactions with us, and even our culture actually influence our self-esteem. We know that the identity formation is seen at this stage. We find that the individuals start trying to establish their own personal speciality or their own personal identity in their relationships. At the same time, we find that there are certain hazards that are associated with this stage of development. We know that there are physical hazards, and we know that they are prone to stress. We know that they involve in certain quarrels or violent activities, especially in the low and middle income countries. We find that one third of all the adolescents have a victim of emotional, physical, or sexual violence, which may be perpetrated by their friends or their partners or their peers. And we also have this threatens like the diseases like HIV and AIDS or other infectious diseases affecting them because of the experimentation on the sexual aspects. And also we see sometimes because of their early involvement in sexual activity that either early pregnancy may result, or this also may result in childbirth with somewhat less limited capable or physical capability children, and they have the burden of taking care of these children. So we find this is a stage of experimentation where they're trying to deal with alcohol, drugs, or tobacco use, depending on their initiation into these activities, sometimes by their peers. And we see that the nutrition or micronutrient deficiencies at this stage also may affect health at later stages. Sometimes we see the adolescents, because of the depression, they may eat more and they become obese. And sometimes in low and middle and high income countries, they may be dependent on somewhat outside food, and these may also affect their obesity. Globally, it is seen that 1 in 6 adolescents aged 10 to 19 years are overweight. And the physical activity also should be cultivated at this stage. And if it is not seen, we see that there are cardio, respiratory, and muscular fitness is not seen. And bone health and maintenance of healthy body weight proportions, height, weight, and proportions is also not seen. So we have to see that the WHO actually recommends these adolescents to take up the physical activity of at least 60 minutes from somewhat moderate to vigorous intensity, which may actually help them to cope up later in adult life. The psychological hazards are also seen. We see that the poor performance in academic activities can affect the individual's self-esteem. And we also see they are trying to conform to peer pressure, as well as they're trying to explore their sexual identity. And also we see that the increased access to technology may also have, without proper parental surveillance, to addiction to either videos, playful videos, or something which may actually be what we call cause some sort of depression in them, or also may result in somewhat being gullible to the social media foibles. So now, with all these effects, we see that the parenting becomes more important during the stage of adolescence. Also, sometimes because of the exclusion by peers or social role understanding, now all these adolescents, they become somewhat marooned, or they have some mental health risk conditions, and they find that they are, because they live in the fragile settings, and also because of their intellectual disabilities also, they may be somewhat be isolated, and they have certain problems, especially the adolescents are from ethnic and social backgrounds what we call the minority backgrounds, or because of the minority ethnic and sexual backgrounds with somewhat, or because they come from the poor families, they may be ostracized or they may be left out. And because they're not being given, considered by the society as well as their peers, they may feel depressed. Now, with these conditions, they may become somewhat inadequate, and their mental health conditions also uh, are affected because of this exclusion, discrimination, stigma, and also because they are not able to understand the social mores or roles. Depression actually sets in. Now, the advent of social media actually has changed the way that the girls perceive themselves. For example, either in Twitter or in some other social media, because there has been emphasis on a particular body weight or a body height, it sometimes the youth may feel somewhat lacking in these aspects, and they have a problem with these, and this may lead to lots of depression. Also, sometimes because if the individuals have few friends, they live somewhat solitary lives, and they spend more time in browsing the internet for hours instead of being socially relating to with others. And we say this internet addiction also can adversely affect the social relations as well as the mental health and the physical activity of the individuals. Now, therefore, to have healthy sleep patterns, one should adopt regular exercise, regular food, and develop coping solutions and problem solving mechanisms, and develop to good relationships with others, that is interpersonal skills. And also they should be able to learn to manage their emotions. Now, supportive environments in family and also good parenting can help to overcome all these problems. Now, the next stage that may be dealing with, we are dealing with, will be with all the issues and the challenges in the adolescents. The adolescents have to deal with so many things, as I was saying earlier, with eating disorders, the psychological factors. They have to overcome the substance abuse. We know that some of the adolescents, they deal in substance abuse, and that is go on using certain substances until they become an abuse, and they include tobacco, alcohol, and illegal and unprescribed drugs. And we know because of the facing the new challenge of new experiences that these people, youngsters involved in all these activities, but then they are biologically wired to seek new experiences. At the same time, this drugs may actually can cause lots of problems, which may be also be associated besides the psychological and physical effects. That is, they may be involved in the violence or vulnerability to diseases, and also they may have certain problems in their concentration. It may affect their moods, may result in anxiety or depression, and also the belief that the drugs are cool is not at all correct. And we see that at this stage, a person, the brain is still developing, and because of the drug use, the brain depends and development remains incomplete, especially the prefrontal cortex and the connections within the brain gets affected. Now we know that the risks in substance abuse are also many, that while intoxicated, they may be getting involved in either violent or other activities. We feel that they have problems in schools and also with family and others, and they lose interest in normal healthy activities, and they have impaired memories, and overdose may also lead to death. So we know that the IQ has been affected in certain cases of drug abuse like marijuana, and also less than one third of adolescents committed to substance abuse treatments have many mental health issues. And we find because of their complete abuse, and also because of their addiction, that these people have a difficulty in getting de-addicted to. Sometimes the over drug usage has also led to death in many cases. Now, one should be aware of the causes and the consequences. Relapse is seen, of course, if we try to go for de-addiction, but then this has to be followed with support by adolescents, parents, and teachers, and treatment providers. But at the same time, it is better that most of the youth should not succumb to the drug use by the external pressure factors. Also, at this stage, there is a possibility that the youth who are more experimental may involve in the sexual activities which may lead to the sexually transmitted diseases. Their unprotected sex and also other sex may lead to skin to skin contact, may lead to so many infections. And the factors that are contributing the spread of STDs are, we find that there are many complications. Sometimes we find that there is a pelvic inflammatory disease, and also pregnancy outside the uterus, infertility, all these are seen. And we see that there are age disparities, and young people between 15 to 24 account for half of all new STDs. And this is because of increased cervical ectopy is seen, and there is adolescent females may have infections. Also, the social, economic, and behavioral factors also related to the spread of STDs. We know that there are personal, racial, and ethnic disparities. STDs actually affect the disadvantaged people, and where there is high sexual risk behavior in social, those social networks are affected. Also, the access to healthcare, access to knowledge, and substance abuse and their secrecy, all these are also seen, which may actually lead to either psychological as well as the physical problems in the youth. Of course, if there anybody is caught with STDs, the most easy thing is they may get easily treated and they can also be managed. But then the youth should be conscious of this and they should be open to getting the medical treatment. So the treatment in early stages involves antibiotics as well as antiviral medications and topical medication. But at the same time, the number of AIDS cases are also seen. But to prevent this deadly disease, it's better to get take precaution as well as get early treatment. Sometimes the problems that are faced by the youth in conjunction with the social or well as economical factors may lead to depression in the youth. We know that the depression has been on the rise, and as well as the suicide rates have been going on in the youth because of the inability to deal with the social pressures and conform to the social norms as well as meet the social expectations. We find that they are either getting depressed or going for suicides. So we understand the symptoms of depression from how the youth behave or the adolescents behave, their mood swings, their physical symptoms, and their self-attitudes. And sometimes we know if someone is introverted and not engaged in many activities, this need not be necessarily a sign of depression. On the other hand, where someone is very involved in social, starts beginning withdrawing from people, then it's a cause of social concern, and one should take care. So also sometimes we see when the people are depressed, there's changes in the mood, changes in physical symptoms like a loss of appetite, weight loss, as well as sleep loss and somewhat less energy in these individuals. Now, we also see if they experiment with drugs or alcohol, or we see that there is some self-injury or eating disorder behaviors. So from these conditions, we can understand that they are developing a destructive behavior. Sometimes the adolescent may feel that they are worthless and they have very little to contribute to life, and their judgment may be impaired, resulting in poor choices. Sometimes they may not apply for a college and they may not be doing well and they may drop out. And with severe depression, the youth also have strong feelings of guilt. They may feel that they may be inadequate and that they're not able to contribute much to their lives or as well as to the society. And the serious symptom of depression is suicidal thinking. So now, since depression can distort the thoughts of people with illness, and their families should be able to support here. Now, it is a most tragic result of untreated depression. So the suicide are at risk for various other consequences also. Then this may result because of their feeling that they are not able to complete their developmental tasks as prescribed by the society, or they may feel a sort of failure. Sometimes lack of motivation, decreased concentration, energy, and the use of other social problems, and also the treatment of depression, all these may actually, a lack of treatment of depression may actually induce these individuals for suicide. Now, the real key, if somebody is going to commit suicide, is to look for their mood change as well as behavior change. And people are, of course, are good at hiding their symptoms, but we should be the parents should be able to monitor their child's mental health and see if they're able to cope up with the situations at the school as well as with social relations. Now, we see that the suicide is death from injury, poisoning, or some other activity which actually compromises the individual and results in the death. Now, it is one of the leading cause of death worldwide within the ranges of 15 to 44, and girls are more likely to attempt suicide, but boys are more likely to succeed. So now they may be dependent on the biological, cultural, sociological, psychological, and interpersonal factors. Now, because of the pressures that the individual may face during the adolescent ages, like at college, or loneliness, or helplessness, or problems with parents, or substance use, or also because of psychopathological problems, which may be because of anxiety, or what we call the changes in adolescence and their inability to cope up with these changes, and because of the family history, all these changes actually help in going for suicide. Now we know that the serotonin levels, which are which is a hormone actually, the serotonin in the brain, these levels of the serotonin as well as the suicide have a direct link. And this is because if the serotonin levels are low, there is suicidal tendency more. Now, several mental disorders are also seen during depression. Sometimes we see the individuals have also having a bipolar disorder. Sometimes they may be extremely happy, sometimes extremely unhappy. Now, several negative life events or circumstances may economic hardships, illnesses, loss of a parent, and all these may also result in suicide. Now, drug treatments are there, but at the same time, psychotherapies also address all of these problems. And generally, these psychotherapists help them to develop healthy thinking patterns. Now, suicidal prevention is very important, and we have several prevention programs built into the school system as well as the societal system to discourage people from attempting suicide. Now, we see at some other stage that juvenile delinquency is one of the conditions that is seen, that these individuals, adolescents who actually act in groups may, because of the parental lack of monitoring, or because of conditions in which they involve in their adulthood, like alcoholism, or maybe due to economical reasons like poverty and overcrowding and breakdown of families and abusive conditions at home, all these may try to get separated from the normal, and they try to go for grouping or peer, and we see that they may actually involve in some socially unwanted activities, and these are known as the juvenile delinquents. And we see they also commit minor offenses to serious crimes, and this social exclusion or as well as the unemployment may lead sometimes to marginalization, and youth may not be able to cope up with this, and they may involved in delinquent behaviors. Now, this is a largely group phenomenon. It's not an individual behavior. Sometimes these individuals try to come together and perform some sort of violent activity. Sometimes they may also have a religious basis or a racial basis or ethnic basis, where they try to attack the other persons of other ethnic or social backgrounds. Now, one has to see that these proper support projects, that these individuals understand the role of responsible citizenship and overcome this problem, especially the economic and social condition address things also should be addressed. Another aspect at early stage is the career planning. We know that the students choose the occupations at this stage depending on their logical and realistic expectations, and also their familial background and economic conditions. So career planning can be a positive experience, and one can also build their skills and expertise at this stage. Now, what are the strategies to support the adolescents at this stage? We know that because of the risk that they are having and the developmental tasks that are assigned, that the individuals should be actually given support to overcome all these problems and gain a strong hold in the society. Now, this is possible because of the parental support as well as the school support in career planning. The career related assignments may also be given, and wise people should be given as models to them, and models to successful models are also provided to the individual so that they are able to develop positively. So we find that the adolescence is full of other risks, and they do get involved in various activities. There are several challenges, but these should be overcome. And the proper support and the psychological understanding from the parents as well as society, we find that these children are able to overcome the hazards that are associated with the adolescence. And the early adulthood is a stage of settling down. We know that the individual starts getting set to the reproductive age. Also, they have now they understand the various problems that they have to cope with as adults. They have actually they learn their new roles, and there's also a sort of emotional tension because they have to cope up with the aspects of what we call getting married and also having kids and trying to take care of them. Early adulthood is a period of social isolation. Sometimes because the individual tries to fit in the patterns of work or career and a marriage, he doesn't have much time to spend with the social relations or with others, and therefore he tries to be somewhat isolated compared to the earlier time. We also see that the early adulthood is a time of commitment to their families. Also, there's a period of dependency when they are dependent on the other partner or on parents or on educational institutions that they are trying to continue their education. There's also a time of value change from the time where they are finding themselves obsessed with their self, like as an adolescent. Now they discuss that the social groups are also important, and they hold that the conventional beliefs and behaviors are overcome to a certain extent. And being a parent, then married adult with children, move on to from egocentric to social sort of life. Early adulthood is also a time of adjustment to new lifestyles. And at this stage, too, the people can be creative activities, and they also take interest and depending on the abilities and their opportunities that are provided in various social activities. Now, at this stage, we find certain characteristics like they achieve autonomy, they are dependent on their own, they have their own identity established, their emotional stability is seen compared to the adolescent stage. They are interested in establishing a career and consolidating a career which gives them an adequate sustenance for life. And they try to understand and develop intimate relationships and familial relationships. They become a part of a group or community, and they establish a residence or a home, and they try to manage a household, and they start becoming a parent and start raising children. Now we see that there are physical and social changes at this stage. We see that there is a myelination, or nerves are become more myelinated, and also synaptic pruning is seen. The importance of formal operational, what we call thinking, becomes more. There is reasoning occurring at this stage. Sometimes we see that another cognitive skill that emerges in the brain is response inhibition. So they actually try to respond, they inhibit their responses immediately, and they try to take more control of the situation. And also, this is a period of change where there is a decline in the growth, and the muscle tone is also declines, and the strength may also a bit decline. Depending on the other things like studies, we know that the lifespan of identical twins is more than the fraternal twins. Also, the age, because of the genes, the aging starts, and also we have somewhat decline in heart and lung functioning and muscle loss. And we find that the immune system also is a bit compromised. Immune system is a combination of specialized cells that actually help to overcome the diseases. Again, we have T cells in the body and B cells, which actually provide us protection, and they secrete antibodies and provide protection against the diseases. And there are changes in these immune systems too. When the human beings or the individuals are somewhat economically advantaged and well educated, their lives are comparatively better and they are more sustainable. Whereas the people, if they are having the wrong kind and wrong amount of food, that may result in lifestyle diseases. And some weight gain is also seen between 25 and 50, and the basal metabolic rate is also seen. But the regular exercise, which reduces fat, body builds muscles, and helps to fight diseases, actually helps at this stage. And the social stage, we find that the phase is such where there is intimacy versus isolation. Sometimes in the early adults, the married and unmarried adults experience loneliness, whereas during adult years, this is because of the unorganized period in life. Whereas if they're married, and generally we find at this stage there is more increase in social participation. Also, there are changes in friendship. They're married, and the change in social groupings also changes from the time where they are affected more by peers. Here, more familial as well as the religious sort of groupings an individual finds himself in. Also, there is more less emphasis placed on popularity. In adolescence, there may be more emphasis placed on popularity, but when in the during adulthood, there is less emphasis placed on popularity. But at the same time, they try to involve in certain activities so that they are not excluded or rejected. Also, the changes in the leadership statutes. Earlier, they may have felt to be leaders, but during adult stage, they are happy to be the follower, and the abilities and training and the prestige that accompanies leadership is also seen here. They are confident they can become a leader, and they try to show more leadership skills that they have acquired. The sex role adjustment is seen in this period. The marital adjustment is also seen. They try to come to an understanding with their family, with their spouse, because they have to establish a family. And the earlier stage, if there is any discord, the discord is tried to be set over. And depending on the family background, age of the time of the marriage, the length of courtship, and the pregnancy, when they are actually trying to go for pregnancy, and also the financial and employment status, and also due to good resolution skills, we find that the marriages succeed. Now, the criteria for successful marriage is, although originally the personal characteristics are found to be important, we find that the marital satisfaction and being open and agreeable to others is more important. And faithfulness and satisfactory sexual relationships are found to be more important than what we call the personal characteristics. And the material aspects like dividing labor, having adequate incomes, dividing the work or the family work between the partners, all these may contribute to the marriage, the good marriage. Now we know that the love has three components according to Robert Sternberg, where he says intimacy, passion, as well as the commitment. Now all these actually help to have a good marriage. Sometimes the conflicts, if they arise any, can be solved depending on the other's perception and listening skills. Mutual respect is another factor which may help for a normal, healthy marriage. Sometimes the adjustment to parenthood is one other condition at this stage. Parenthood is taking care of their children, and it does not come easily. Sometimes it involves a number of tasks which have to be done with the help of the other spouse. The work and career and the other aspects during this stage. One has to earn their livelihood, and their career aspects are also seen here. And long-term career ambitions have to be mingled along with the familiar aspects. And because of this, the adults may find certain problems in adjustment of the both work and career with family. Especially, the selection of the vocation or career is based on the family influence and the gender. And also, because if they're females, the types of the occupations that they can get involved are different from those of the males. The vocational adjustment or career adjustment is another problem, because until then they have been either studying or staying with their parents, but with marriage and career come changes in both at the familial background, the family, as well as at the earning stage, that is at the what we call working space. And here too, there are certain adjustmental problems which the individual should overcome. And when they overcome this, they can be more at peace. So here also we find that there are sometimes changes of jobs which may result in certain problems in the individuals. They have to be satisfied. Job satisfaction is another criteria. And the achievements of what one achieves in his career, they all have what we call a role in individual happiness. So at this stage, We also find, besides the developmental tasks that are set by the society with regard to the family and getting social recognition, as well as trying to balance the work and family, we find that there are certain hazards, like they may be overprotective parents or somewhat prolonged peer influence. And we find that there are physical hazards like physical defects or poor health, religious hazards, where there is a emotional disturbance because of they adopt to a new religion or because of inter religious marriages. And also sometimes we see that their social hazards are there because of the responsibilities of at home. We find lack of time and money and lack of congeniality or lack of understanding and dissatisfaction with a social group or family, or trying to be a follower role in adult. We find that the individuals are trying having social problems, which may again result in mental tensions. Now, individuals who are socially mobile, they are actually having more problems than people who stay at home are socially immobile. The sexual roles, that if a person is somewhat different from the others, like we have now the LGBTQ, now they have difficulty in getting accepted by society, and this personal adjustment also take time, and to understand what is a person's sex role, and trying to come to an understanding of their own body and trying to understand their own sexuality may also be considered problem. But even in spite of it, we know that the society mistreats young women or the LGBTQ compared to men. Now, these roles, sexual adjustments is also a problem because an individual finds satisfaction. They are able to understand their own personality and individuality and sexuality, as well as they're having comfortable economic conditions, as well as responsibility sharing at home. And especially if they're involved in marriage, they would like to have the responsibility sharing for at home as well as the child care. Now, also, this is a period of changing the vocation or suiting, taking a vocation or taking a career, and the career planning also helps here. And if they have any difficulties in the career, they may feel that they're maladjusted to a particular job. Now, these are the conditions that the early adults find. The middle ages, of course, somewhat has some other different conditions. The parenthood again comes with wrongs. We find is a time of stress because that they have to take care of their younger persons. Is also an awkward age. They also try to evaluate their life till then, and it's a time of boredom. Sometimes if they are divorced or they have other problems, or a wife dies early, if they have this their family feeling like an empty nest. And at this stage, during middle adulthood, we find the body changes occurring, the interests change, the vocational adjustments are seen, and there are more tasks to family life. Like one has to adjust to aging parents or dying parents, and one has to assist their teenage children, or one has to relate oneself to a spouse as a person, and to become responsible and happy adults, one has to see all these things. And we know that the youth at this time, they know that they are no longer young, and they have this what we call, if the past is somewhat hurtful to them, they may also be related in destructive activities. But if they are more happy with their other spouses, they may be more creative. Also, here we know that they either get engaged or separated from the worldly activities. At this stage in the middle adulthood, we find that there are changes in appearance, changes in the bones and joints. The reproductive changes are also seen. One change is difficulties in the vision and hearing. They find themselves using glasses or the equivalent processes. They may also sometimes see somewhat find problems with their hearing. They may lose loss of, there may be appetite, or sometimes there may be insomnia. There may be certain diseases with which they have to cope up. All these psychological changes are also seen during this stage, where we find that their memory gets somewhat changed. The episodic memory, or the memory, their ability to recollect personal experiences, whereas the semantic experiences are the ability to recollect general knowledge facts, these also start getting affected. Now, they may forget where they have parked a car, or they may forget the rules of a game. Now, lifelong learning is the best way to overcome these problems with memory. We find the social changes also taking place. Good social adjustment is required. So, as middle-aged people, one must depend on others for either companionship or for making better social relations. But then, in close-knit social communities, it is more possible to be related with others, and therefore they are more happier individuals. But in urban societies or metrosexual societies, we find that the people have difficulty in relating their own social rules, and they do not get the satisfaction from social contact or social relations. The vocational changes, on the other hand, and the unfavorable social attitudes towards the middle-aged men or women, and the organizational hiring policies, where they may give only preference to youth, and the increased use of automation and compulsory retirement, all this may actually lead to somewhat discontent at this stage. And we know that the family roles are changing gradually. But sometimes good vocations, that satisfaction with work, opportunities for promotion, and vocational expectations, and the attitudes of the spouses and the attitude towards co-workers, all these may have a positive influence. Sometimes there may be relocation or somewhat underachievement or less job satisfaction, which may result in somewhat negative trends. Now comes the old age, and we know during old age, there are several age-related changes seen, the social relations change, and also we see that there are changes in the brain resulting in macular degeneration. That is, the macula, that is the part near the eye of the retina, gets degenerated. There are problems with eyes and ears, and older adults have problems with either their hearts and also strokes. They may be seen sometimes. Sometimes there are psychological changes seen. The social times are somewhat different. The friendships, we find their friend, they find their friends gone away from one to one. And also, if there are friendships at this stage, if they are able to have successful relationships at this stage, it may actually contribute to happy living at this stage. Now here, the youth, according to Erickson, it may be the people may find themselves having integrity, where they feel that their life has been successful and they find possibilities at this stage too. Or sometimes they may feel that they have not actually done well in life, and they may find themselves somewhat disintegrated personalities. We find that they try to redefine themselves at this stage. Sometimes we find sometimes they're confined to their own self, or sometimes they are preoccupied with their work. But then the work changes, and people have to find themselves to relocate themselves to the new social roles that are prescribed. They should find more happiness being a grandparent, or with some gardening activity or other activities which does not involve professional labor. So because that professional labor may actually cost them their health. So they have to understand that with increased changes in the body, that they should adapt themselves. Also, sometimes we find that there is either body transcendence or body preoccupation. One should not be completely occupied with their own body, but they have to understand that physical deterioration is a part of the aging process, and they should try to overcome it. We also find that the ego preoccupation is seen, but then trying to understand and overcome and transcend it, and also understand their contribution in the form of their work or their achievement or their children or work and civil activities must take more precedence. We also find that if the individual is not happy and is disorganized, it is dependent, results in a disorganized personality, whereas an integrated personality with a independent personality may find more happiness. We also find that Neo talks about the four personality types that are seen there in the aging, which are generally common to all the aged persons. One is disintegrated or disorganized personalities. These are actually hospitalized and are placed in nursing homes. Sometimes they're passive, dependent personalities. They have insecurities which lead these people to make the families take care of them. Then there are defended personalities who are actually they respond to fear of aging with a different approach, and they involve in various youthful activities. But again, this may not be realistic on their part, and there are integrated personalities where the people are happy and they are able to understand their deteriorating condition and accept it, and also try to find happiness in the activities in which they get involved. Also, at this stage, the individuals must try to get the changes in their lifestyle as well as the retirement, and they may involve themselves in the leisure activities and interests and the religious activities too, and also in family lives too. One has to adjust. Their spouse may die, or there may be widowhood, or there may be grief and mourning, and this may result in physical inabilities too. But one should try to overcome this with some sort of semblance and reasoning. The hazards that are seen at this stage in the old age are the physical, psychological, as well as social changes. We find that because of the changes in the family systems and because of the modern life tensions, we find, and there are neutral families now more. We find the if elder, they are placed in the elder care, but at the same time, we are even the National Center on Elder Abuse has said that there is the physical abuse, sexual abuse, and emotional and psychological abuse of the elderly, as well as financial and material exploitation, and they may feel abandoned, neglected, and also they themselves may self-neglect them. But to overcome all these, taking care, being understanding, taking care of the elderly is also a matter of concern for societies like us. So the elderly stage, an individual starting from an individual stage is able to come over to the older stage. There are several developmental tasks described at a stage. Each stage, there are hazards associated with each stage, but by understanding the different theories, psychological theories, one can understand at which stage an individual is placed and the problems and the hazards that are associated with some such stages, and to overcome these stages, what precautions one can take and what sort of care the society, the nation, as well as the family have to take to make them feel protected, because an individual life is very precious, and because an individual has to contribute to the society, and the society also has to take care of the individual. Because of these contactual relationships, it becomes necessary that the roles that are assigned at every stage are understood. The family as well as the society gives a protective stage to the individual at every stage, so that the individuals lead a good, common, and dignified life. With this, we come to an end of the lifespan development, and we have covered different theories, the theories as well as the developmental tasks, as well as the problems or the challenges that one faces at many of these stages. They form the founding block of the understanding of the lifespan development. With this, I conclude. Thank you.